What happens when the new coach disrespects a man who survived 3 war zones? Mason Thomas, retired Delta Force operator, faced shocking disrespect at Westwood High. The confrontation that followed, it left everyone questioning who really owned that basketball court. Mason Thomas had been coaching basketball at Westwood High for over 15 years. Before that, he'd served 12 years in Delta Force, completing 4 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. The discipline, leadership, and calm under pressure that kept him alive in combat now shaped generations of young athletes. Players respected Coach Thomas not because he yelled the loudest, but because he never needed to. His commanding presence came from experience, both on battlefields where split-second decisions meant life or death, and on basketball courts where he transformed insecure teenagers into confident young adults. The walls of his modest office displayed few military mementos, just a folded flag in a shadow box and a team photo from his unit. Instead, he filled the space with tournament trophies and pictures of former players who'd gone on to college scholarships, military service, and even professional careers. Mason had outlasted 4 principals and 7 athletic directors. He'd seen coaching fads come and go, whether budget cuts, and maintained the program's excellence through it all. His teams weren't always the most talented, but they were disciplined, strategic, and unbreakable under pressure. Then Aaron Richards arrived. The new athletic director strutted through Westwood's halls like he owned them, diploma from an elite sports management program practically pinned to his designer polo shirts. At 32, Richards carried himself with the entitlement of someone who believed his modern theories trumped decades of practical experience. Within 2 weeks, Richard had alienated half the coaching staff with his condescension and thinly veiled insults. He dismissed veteran coaches' methods as outdated and interrupted strategy meetings with long-winded speeches about innovative approaches. But Mason noticed something else behind Richard's arrogance. The man had never actually coached anything himself. Mason was reviewing game footage when a sharp knock interrupted his concentration. He looked up to see Richards leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "Coach Thomas," Richard said, deliberately using his title rather than the Mason everyone else used, as if to emphasize the gap between them. "Watching old games? Nostalgic for the glory days." Mason paused the video, his expression neutral. Years of negotiating with tribal leaders and diffusing hostile situations had taught him to control his reactions. Just preparing for Friday's game. Richard stepped inside uninvited, eyes scanning the modest office with poorly disguised contempt. "You know, I've been reviewing program budgets. Your team gets considerable resources, considering recent performance." Mason turned his chair to face Richards directly. "We made regionals last year with the youngest squad in the district. Participation trophies don't build college prospects," Richards replied, picking up a team photo. "I've been speaking with some parents who feel your methods are outdated." He set the frame down carelessly. "Military-style discipline doesn't translate to modern athletics, coach." A heavy silence settled between them. Mason folded his hands on the desk, maintaining the same calm he'd shown during interrogations in Kandahar. "You've been here 2 weeks, and you think you understand my coaching philosophy?" Richard shrugged. "I understand results. And analytics. The old guard loves their drills and tough love, afraid to embrace data-driven approaches. You probably still make them run suicides from missed free throws, don't you?" Mason sighed, shaking his head. "Basketball isn't just about statistics." "Basketball is exactly about statistics," Richards countered. "That's why they keep score." Mason stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "Mr. Richards, let me tell you something. The real problem isn't old versus new. It's people who think theory trumps experience without taking the time to observe." Richard smirked in waver. "You can't teach an old dog new tricks, I suppose." Mason took a step closer, his eyes locking onto Richard's. "And you can't lead men when you've never followed." That first encounter was just the opening salvo. Over the next few weeks, Richards made his presence felt across the athletic department. He mandated new training methodologies without consulting coaches, revised long-established team policies overnight, and dismissed concerns with corporate buzzwords about disruption and paradigm shifts. Most coaches adapted by avoiding him. The younger ones nodded along, too intimidated to disagree. But Mason was different. 20 years in special operations had taught him that real leadership meant standing your ground when necessary. The tension crystallized one afternoon in the coach's office. Several staff members sat scattered around, discussing upcoming games between bites of lunch. Mason was refilling his water bottle when Richard's voice cut through the casual conversation. "You know, Thomas, I still don't get it." Richards leaned against the counter beside him. Mason didn't look up. "What don't you get?" "Why everyone treats you like you're some kind of coaching legend." Richards glanced around to ensure others were listening. "What's your secret? You buddy up with the superintendent on weekend fishing trips." A few coaches exchanged uncomfortable glances. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the vending machine. "Respect," Mason said simply. Richards snorted. "Please. You don't get respect just by wearing a whistle for 15 years. Mason finally turned to face him, his calm gaze meeting Richards' challenging one. "No, you earn it. Something you wouldn't understand." Richards' jaw tightened, but his smirk remained fixed. "You talk big, but at the end of the day, you're just an old soldier with a clipboard. What are you going to do if I don't show you respect? Make me do push-ups?" Mason took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving Richards. "No, I'll just wait." "Wait for what?" Richards' voice carried a hint of uncertainty. Mason's reply was quiet. "People like you always defeat themselves." His words lingered in the air long after he'd walked away, leaving Richard standing alone as other coaches suddenly found reasons to leave the room. The crucial moment came during Thursday's practice. Mason was working with the second string when he noticed commotion on the main court. Richards had taken upon himself to oversee the varsity drills, clipboard in hand, offering unsolicited improvements to Mason's assistant coach, Tyler Johnson, a junior guard who worked tirelessly to overcome his natural shyness, was running a play when Richards blew his whistle. "Johnson, what was that?" Richards' voice echoed through the gym. Tyler froze, caught off guard. "Sir, that hesitation on the crossover. Do it again." Tyler nodded, repeating the drill with slightly more confidence. Richards shook his head dramatically. "Are you serious? This is varsity basketball, not remedial PE." Richards turned to the other players. "Is he always as slow to grasp concepts?" The team stood awkwardly, uncomfortable with the public humiliation. Tyler's face flushed red, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Maybe you should consider managing the team instead of playing on it." Richards continued. "Some people just aren't cut out for competitive sports." Mason saw it all from across the gym. The way Tyler's shoulders slumped, how the other players avoided eye contact, the assistant coach's helpless expression. He excused himself from his group and walked over, his pace measured, his face expressionless. "Mr. Richards," he said calmly. "A word, please." Richards turned, surprised. "We're in the middle of practice, coach." "Yes, my practice." Mason's voice remained level, but something in his tone made Richards step back. "Tyler, continue the drill. 5 more repetitions. Focus on explosive first step." After practice, Tyler lingered behind, approaching Mason's office with the same defeated posture. He knocked tentatively. "Coach Thomas, can I talk to you?" Mason gestured to the chair across from his desk. Tyler sat, hands fidgeting with his water bottle. "I don't think I belong on varsity," he mumbled. "Maybe Mr. Richards is right." Mason's grip tightened on his pen, but his voice remained gentle. "Tyler, how long have I been coaching?" 15 years, sir." "And how long has Mr. Richards been watching you play?" Tyler looked up. 2 weeks, I guess." Mason nodded. "Who do you think has a better assessment of your potential?" Mason found Richards in the hallway outside the gym the following morning, scrolling through his phone. The athletic director looked up as Mason approached, that familiar smirk already in place. "Thomas, what can I do for you?" Mason stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Richards had to tilt his head slightly to maintain eye contact. At 6 feet 2 inches with the solid build of someone who still maintained military fitness standards, Mason didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. "We need to talk about Tyler Johnson. Richards rolled his eyes. The kid who can't run a basic crossover? What about him? You humiliated him in front of his teammates. I gave him feedback. Richards straightened his designer tie. If he can't handle criticism, criticism builds. Humiliation destroys. Mason's words cut through Richards' excuse. There's a difference. Richards' smirk faltered momentarily before he recovered. Look, not everyone responds to your gentle encouragement approach. Some players need a reality check. A reality check? Mason's voice remained calm, but something changed in his eyes, the same focused intensity that had served him during high-stakes operations. You think embarrassing a teenager who's worked his way up from JV through pure determination is a reality check? A few players walking to morning practice slowed, sensing the tension. Don't lecture me about coaching psychology, Richard scoffed. I have a master's degree in sports management, and I have 15 years watching young men either flourish or quit based on how they're treated. Tyler Johnson has overcome more obstacles than you know. Richards glanced around, uncomfortable with the gathering audience. You're overreacting. This is exactly why traditional coaches struggle with modern athletic programs. You're too soft. Mason smiled, a slow, knowing smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Richards, in my former career, I led men through situations you couldn't imagine in your worst nightmares. I've made life and death decisions under enemy fire. I know the difference between pushing someone to excellence and breaking their spirit. He took a step closer, his voice dropping so only Richards could hear. You mistake fear for respect. You think intimidation is leadership, but you'll learn the hard way that fear doesn't build champions. Richards' confident facade cracked just enough to reveal uncertainty beneath. Is that a threat? No, Mason replied. That's experience talking, and I'm just getting started. Mason had learned in special operations that direct assault wasn't always the most effective strategy. Sometimes, the mission required intelligence gathering, coalition building, and strategic patience. By Monday, he had emails from 3 parents concerned about Richards' behavior toward their sons. By Wednesday, 2 assistant coaches had documented instances of Richards undermining established team protocols. Mason methodically compiled every incident, every witness statement, and every example of Richards' detrimental impact on student-athletes. He approached each conversation the same way he'd once gathered intelligence, allowing people to tell their stories without leading them, documenting facts rather than emotions, and building a comprehensive picture of the situation. When the girls' volleyball coach mentioned Richards had suggested cutting players based solely on physical appearance rather than skill, Mason added it to his growing file. When the equipment manager reported Richards had denied basic maintenance requests while approving expensive new office furniture for himself, that went in too. Mason didn't gossip or encourage others to confront Richards directly. He simply created space for the truth to emerge, ensuring each incident was properly documented and submitted through appropriate channels. At the same time, he doubled down on supporting his players, especially Tyler. He assigned him leadership responsibilities, highlighted his improvements, and made sure the team recognized his contributions. The principal received the first formal complaint 2 weeks after Mason's confrontation with Richards. By the end of the month, the superintendent had scheduled a review of the athletic department's new leadership. Richards had built his short career on intimidation and flash, but he had underestimated the resilience of a community bound by something stronger than fear. He had never faced an opponent trained to win not just battles, but entire campaigns. The announcement came via email on a Tuesday morning. Richards was pursuing other opportunities, effective immediately. The former athletic director would return temporarily while a search committee formed. There was no farewell, no explanations, just an empty office with boxes of untouched athletic department strategic plan binders and a removed nameplate. Mason felt no satisfaction when he read the email. Victory wasn't the point. Protecting his players was, and damage remained. Like the villages he'd seen after insurgents were driven out, the team still carried invisible wounds. Tyler still hesitated before speaking up in team meetings. Other players had grown cautious, second-guessing themselves during drills. The camaraderie that had defined Westwood basketball, the trust that allowed players to take risks and grow, had been eroded by Richard's brief tenure. During practice that afternoon, Mason noticed how Tyler passed up an open shot, how conversation in the locker room remained subdued, how players glanced toward the door whenever it opened, as if expecting criticism to walk through. Fear lingered in the silences, in the averted gazes, in the flinches when Mason raised his voice to be heard across the court. Richards was gone, but the echo of his words remained. Mason recognized the symptoms immediately. He'd seen the same behaviors in young soldiers after particularly aggressive commanders were replaced. Relief mixed with lingering anxiety. Freedom coupled with the fear it might be temporary. The battle was won, but the mission wasn't complete. It wasn't enough to remove the source of damage. True victory required rebuilding what had been broken. Mason approached reconstruction with the same methodical care he'd once applied to rebuilding trust with local populations after combat operations. Basketball practice became about more than plays and conditioning. It became about restoring trust. He implemented techniques he'd learned in the military for rebuilding unit cohesion after trauma. Team-building exercises that fostered communication. Decision-making drills that empowered players to trust their instincts. Leadership rotations that gave every player, including the quietest ones, opportunities to direct their teammates. For Tyler specifically, Mason created graduated challenges, small opportunities for success that built toward bigger ones. He assigned him to mentor freshmen, positioning him as someone with valuable knowledge to share. During scrimmages, Mason deliberately created scenarios where Tyler's specific strengths were showcased. In the military, Mason told his assistant coaches, "We learned that confidence isn't built through words, but through proven performance under stress. We need to create controlled stress situations where they can succeed." The practices grew longer, more intense, but also more collaborative. When players made mistakes, Mason instituted a new rule. They had to immediately identify what they do differently next time, removing the focus from failure and placing it on growth. He brought in former players now succeeding in college basketball to speak about overcoming their own doubts. He created video compilations showing each player's improvement over time, concrete evidence of their capabilities. When Tyler hesitated with the ball, Mason didn't criticize. He waited. When others doubted their decisions, he pushed them to play through it. When voices remained quiet in huddles, he created space for them to grow louder. In combat, he explained to a questioning parent, we learned that confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the knowledge that you can function effectively despite it. That's what we're building here. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It came in small moments, accumulated over weeks of intentional effort. It appeared first when Tyler called out an adjustment during a scrimmage, without looking to Mason for approval. It showed when another player missed a crucial shot in practice, then immediately set up for the next one, instead of hanging his head. During the season's first home game, down by 2 points with 30 seconds remaining, Tyler caught Mason's eye from the court. Instead of looking for instruction, he gave a small nod, a silent communication that he saw the defensive weakness and knew how to exploit it. When he drove to the basket, drawing the defense before kicking out to an open teammate for the game-winning three-pointer, the hesitation that had plagued him was nowhere to be seen. The team's record improved, but Mason measured success differently. He saw it in the return of trash talking during practice, in the renewed energy of locker room debates about professional games, in a way players once again stayed late to work on their skills without being asked. Most importantly, he saw it in their eyes, the return of confidence, not from absence of challenge, but from knowing they could meet challenges head-on. After the final game of the season, a hard-fought state quarterfinal, they narrowly lost. Mason sat in his office reviewing notes when a knock sounded at the door. Tyler stood there, basketball tucked under his arm, his posture notably different from months before. "Coach Thomas, I got offered that scholarship to state." His voice was steady, proud. I wanted to say thank you." Mason's throat tightened, but he managed a smile. "You earned that yourself, Tyler. I just made sure nothing stood in your way." Tyler nodded, shoulders square before he turned to leave. As Mason watched him walk away, he reflected on what his Delta Force commander had once told him. True leadership isn't about controlling others. It's about creating environments where others can control their own destiny. Because some people in this world you just don't mess with, not because they're intimidating, but because they know that real power isn't about making others feel small. It's about showing them how big they can be.